grab your drink and sit down. Listen to the podcast of the strange, the old, the pagan, and the Christian overcoming evil. This is the Grizzly Files podcast.
The Spanish wife just called the Spanish gay. Anyway, welcome.
No, I did not.
Gosh dang it, woman. I don't want to have to go for another. You know what? I'll cut it out in post. All right.
You just leave that be.
It's not my fault you think the Spanish are gay. Rosie, are you in on this? You're trying to steal my donut. Help me! Welcome to the Grizzly Files. There's a dog trying to steal my donut. Send the police. Help! Anyway. Welcome to the Grizzly Files. I am RP Grizzly.
I'm Mama Grizzly.
No, thank you. I was about to say, I'm not alone, am I? And this is Doggo Grizzly, Rosie Pants, trying to steal everyone's donuts. And this is the late episode after months of non-action. Well, lots of action on our part, just not on this show. We apologize. But we are finally moved in. We're finally calm enough. We finally feel prayed up enough to be able to talk about weird and the strange and all the odd stuff again. So, I hear a cat meowing. We'll probably ignore him, though. Welcome again, and we're going to get right into it. So today we are talking about Le Vampire Wife.
We're drinking Mike's Hard Strawberry Lemonade.
Oh, excuse me. My wife's like...
And we're also eating donuts, if you have not heard about the dog eating donuts. Now, we're going to talk about whatever he said.
No. I have to, delay as much as you can. My wife doesn't like these stories as much, but... Oh, hang on. That was professional as heck of me. Vampire, no. This is what a vampire sounds like when it's had too much to eat.
We are professionally unprofessional.
You're professionally unprofessional. That's what Doggo thinks. Yes. We're talking about vampires. In particular, we're talking about the vampires that popped up in the the Austrian, you know what I mean. The Austrian Empire. Those dudes.
Ottoman Empire.
Ottomans were the Turks. Austrians were the Austrian
Yeah, I know,
Hungarian.
but it was around the time of something or other with the Turks and the
Pala. Well, we've all, if you know anything about vampire lore, you've heard the Dracula novel myth story about Vlad the Impaler, which is in the same region of the Balkans that the Austrian Empire took over.
Which were the Turks.
Mm-hmm. No.
Gobble.
Why do I always do that?
Wait, take a bite when you back
Yeah, I know. It's like I'm always talking or something. That's why I got a podcast. Well, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, Vlad the Impaler was the first vampire in Dracula, blah, blah, blah. What's the... In Hotel Transylvania. Don't watch the other ones. Blah, blah, blah. You just... On camera? Okay. That's what we want to be remembered by, dog. Anyway.
I didn't do it on camera.
I can film it for you.
No, people are confused.
My wife farted.
Oh. What are we filming?
Wife doesn't know it, but I have a secret camera here, and this is suddenly a very video podcast. Say hi, wife. Oh man, she didn't even look. God, now I have to actually stick a camera into the next one. Anyway, so that whole story, that's just fiction. That's fiction. The Dracula story, that's someone just writing a novel and wanting to slander a historical figure that they didn't like. Dracula was a very interesting fellow. And quite frankly, he was called the Impaler, which is funny because he only impaled prisoners of the people who had impaled his people. If you don't know, the Turks were known for taking rebellions and impaling everyone through the bottom half, through their top half while they're still alive, of a pole, including women and children. All Vlad did was take the soldiers who did that kind of thing and impale them instead. And he got branded the Impaler, while the Turks were, I guess, beautiful little angels who just impaled 2-year-olds every now and then. But history doesn't have any weirdness about it, does it? Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about real vampire stories. The vampire hunters of the Austrian Empire, which was actually on the books. Because the Austrians had this funny problem. Because they'd been ceded the land by the Turks. And so they'd sent out these little imperial envoys all throughout the Balkans, in their new territory, to figure out what's going on with them, how to get them to, transfer over to Austrian control from the Turk control and make that a nice, smooth little process. Management change always goes so well. We all enjoy that. And they were running into some problems. Namely, in this case, one very documented case of a vampire terrorizing a town, and the town going so crazy that they demanded that the... I had his name written down. That the imperial regent stay and watch them kill the vampire. Or, stake the chest of the body that's sleeping in the coffin. And if he didn't, they were going to abandon their village because they'd seen this sort of thing happen before, and if they don't leave, everyone was going to die. A very fascinating episode. So, the donuts are good. It's too tempting. God, I gotta skip some of this. So, there were a couple instances of this happening before they started the vampire hunting crew, if you will. It is fascinating, again, because some early vampire stories, and I brought this up with people before, take on more of a spirit coming in, malicious spirit that's taking on the form of your dead loved one and draining you of life. That kind of thing. Usually you see it in a dream and then you wake up sick and you start to die. So that, of course, is much more in line with plenty of other demonic stories, the Wendigo stuff, and all the rest. But what's interesting about the stories that kind of popped up in this Austrian time is this is where we get the counter theory to vampires. Ooh, yes. I'm sure many of you have heard this one. Those silly old religious people, they didn't understand how the anatomy of the human anatomy worked, and they were just mistaking the natural decomposition for vampirism. Yes. How many have heard that? Come on, raise your hands. You know you're there. Now slap yourself upside the head. This is a stupid argument. For one, if you actually read the argument, what's described only as the natural decomposition that could explain the things going on with these bodies that we're going to read only explains 2 or 3 of the symptoms, not all of them, and not to the severity that was being talked about. Moreover, these peasants were in the Balkans during pre-World War I era, which meant they knew what death was like. Raiding, death, rebellion was all a thing happening in that region. There's a reason why the Turks ceded it over to the Austrians, is because of a lot of wars and death and rebellious people. Meaning, these people had seen a lot more dead bodies than I have. They knew what the decomposition was, probably better than our morticians, because our morticians, if you don't know, don't generally sit around watching bodies rot. They tend to put them in the ground or cremate them pretty fast. It's kind of this ironic, frustrating thing that people that have seen bodies bloating out, rebellions, people not getting buried, people being stuck out, as we brought up, on pikes, being stuck up by the Turks for rebellion, and you're not allowed to take the body down and all that kind of stuff, right? These people knew what death looked like. People would starve to death. People would freeze to death in the winters. Things would happen. There's these guys called the Cossacks in this region. You should look them up sometime. Much in the same time period. Lots of raiding, lots of killing, lots of piracy. So to sit here and say these people didn't understand what the natural decomposition of a body was is downright silly. It's stupid. They've seen more bodies than most of the scientists saying this. And the idea that they were going to mix up the normal decomposition of a body with a vampire is dumb. It's very dumb and stupid. And it can only work with a modern, prideful mindset. I mean that. prideful mindset, wife.
Yeah, so brave.
Why did I bring you? You're too tired. I should have left you in bed. It's
I'm
like,
not tired. I'm just thinking happy thoughts.
No, I'm not here. I'm not talking about vampires.
Lemonade. I'm here for the lemonade.
Naturally. The hard lemonade. No. The dog's here for the donuts.
Not as hard as you.
Back, Jack. Yeah, I did hear that. It's okay, Mike. Don't worry. She's just married to me. Anyway, so...
Who are we talking to? That might.
Let's start with the particular case. Now that we've established that these people probably know more about dead bodies than modern morticians and scientists, because again, unlike morticians and stuff in the modern world, they were far more likely to see bodies in all states of decomposition because of raiding, piracy, death, Mongols back in the day, though they didn't have to deal with Mongols anymore at this point. But you get when these beliefs started picking up, by the time the Austrians got to them, this was a really set in belief. This wasn't something that came out of nowhere. I'm not saying it definitely went back to Mongolia, but we're talking but
it could have been.
Okay. What I'm trying to say here is vampire myths and ideas about vampires are pretty universal. There's some weird version of a blood-sucking freak in most mythoses out there. Or something like it that drains your life force. Especially if you factor in some of the older myths about, as I brought up, them... did I bring that up in the new recording? Or was that the last take? Whatever. Come in as demonic spirits, basically pretending to be your loved one in a dream, and then you start to die, right? Even those stories kind of match up, but again, there's the eye swing and I totally screwed that up and went really southern, even though I'm not southern for something. The ass swing. That one, that vampire myth, that thing decides to it looked at vampires and went, okay, that's terrifying. Let me jump it up a notch and be really disgusting. And not only do I have a tongue longer than my entire body. What were you saying?
Yeah. I was going to make a joke about ass swinging.
Ass swing? It swings on its ass? Well, actually, it left its ass behind. They're it's supposed to be it rips its torso off and flies around to go eat things. With big long tongue. Usually female.
Ew.
There are also plenty of more, I know, crazy, Japan mythos being more normal, right? But for once, the Philippines in that area actually have, I think it's Philippines and a little bit of Southeast Asia, actually have the Japanese beat on a weirdness thing. The Japanese vampire is like an ice vampire. It has lots of cold things, but it drains your life force and all this business. Interesting.
Ew.
Yeah, but at least it's not cutting its torso off and has a tongue longer than its entire body coming after you.
That's very unladylike.
Now you're getting into it, wife.
Ew.
Most things aren't very ladylike that we talk about, to be fair. Now.
Have you heard of the mermaids?
Heard about the mermaids?
Stop.
Alright. Now, I can't think of something expressly vampiric amongst Native American mythos off the top of my head, but there are similar, spirit draining life force entities out there. A lot of things that show similar.
Chupacabra goes after your goats.
Yeah, but that's pretty recent. If you know what I mean. That's not ancient vampire. Oh, I'm chewing. Quick, say something funny.
Dinosaurs are gay.
That was funny. I enjoyed that. I don't know if anybody else is going to enjoy that. Probably gay because of vampiric dinosaurs is what it was. But they do have, that's also kind of tough because a lot of those beliefs amongst the Native Americans interpose and are on top of each other and then have unique versions over here. There's 1,000 different stories of the Wendigo. Though we've already talked about the original stories of the Wendigo. giants and all that.
We don't even.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that. But
Just smoke on your tongue.
Ramirez, tie my shoelaces. Woo, I'm dating myself with that joke. To think the Call of Duty 4 is now ancient history in internet life.
Man, to think you're so mature.
I'll show you who's mature. But anyway, let's get into some of the first cases of vampirism that actually got documented in like an imperial source.
Was it Hitler?
And again,
Sorry.
Hitler wasn't around yet. Ha ha ha.
I'm joking.
World War I hadn't started yet. Ha ha ha.
Oh.
But the Austrian Empire did take these stories seriously
So
enough.
it was Stalin. They were Stalin.
That they put in this investigation group together. But the first case was a man called Peter Blagojevic. Anyway, I'm going to move on.
Move on from
All right.
that fix. I'm sorry.
And this... Crying out loud. And this was in one of those villages that was... You're so mature, yes. That was ceded from the Turks to the Austrians. Now, I think it was Kiselejevo? Don't quote me on that. And the Austrian guy doing it was called Ernest Farmbolt. There's the name. Ernest. No wonder that they didn't pick him up for the vampire hunting story. Van Helsing is just more of a
earnestly
ring.
searched for his victims.
Ernest Helsing. Maybe Helsing's real last name was Farmbolt and he just got embarrassed. But
That farm bolted.
though it is funny that the original story in Dracula, right? Van Helsing, though he has an epic name, is actually kind of a nerdy little doctor guy, and who accidentally hunts the vampire. Our modern take on Van Helsing is more of a Solomon Kane with Van Helsing's name. And, that's a difficult one because that image of the hat, the burning, the guns, and the stabby stab, that's Solomon Kane all the way, baby. The guy who made Conan the Barbarian made that guy too. It's hard to say which name is cooler. Van Helsing does roll off the tongue more, but Solomon Kane just sounds fun. Anyway, back to the real stories here. So, in the town of Kiselejevo, we had a man named Peter Blagojevic, and Ernest Farmbolt was there presiding over the takeover of the village from the Turks to the Austrians. Now, at that point, I think it was, first death was like at 1725, the victims were all claiming that they had a dream where Bajalkovic attacked them in their sleep. They would wake up, tell people about their dream, and then they would be dead in a few days. And this happened over and over again. There was 9 dead altogether by the time Farmbolt showed up. So this isn't a small thing. And, you'll have the skeptic who say, it was just disease. Or the first one would probably be mass hysteria. I'm confused. Does mass hysteria often just kill people in their sleep? Remember, people have the dream and then they're dead. I'm not saying your brain can't tell your mind to shut off, but I feel like there'd be a lot more dead humans if it was just that easy. As Miss Margaret down the street says that the guy who died 5 days ago came after her and then she died. Then I have a dream about the guy coming after me. Unless something really weird's happening, I don't see why I would die. I would just have a bad dream, don't you think? I've had bad dreams before. I've never had any of them kill me. That I know of. If this is heaven, it sucks. I mean, it's not horrible. I like it. But it's not heaven. Maybe it's purgatory. Hey, that's interesting. Anyway, the point is...
Don't you get all...
Get all Catholic on me. Brain in the vat, wife. Brain into that. Is any of this actually happening? So, your next thing is, well, it's just a disease then. It's just a disease going through all these villagers and blah, blah, blah. Then why are they all dreaming about the same guy? It's a disease and mass hysteria. You're adding to your equation a lot. Like a lot here. And it's not enough to describe why each one would have the same dream and then die. Moreover, if it was this virulent of a disease, more of them should be dying and getting sick. If they're dying within a couple days of showing symptoms. But I digress. We get back into
Digress.
I digress.
It's a horrible joke.
So, but still, we could say a disease in mass hysteria. Fine, we'll start with that. The villagers are quite intense and demand that Farmbolt be witness to them as they exhume the grave to stab Bolshevik in the chest. He at first is trying to tell them, let's hold off and not do anything. The villagers were in such distress, they told him if they didn't do this now, they would abandon the village. Just like that, and leave. And because, as they said, this has happened before, and so many people died that they were afraid they would all be dead by the end of it, and the village would be gone. Now, what's funny about this is this region actually has a lot of dead cities. Like, we're talking, this is ancient stuff. Like, we're going all the way back to the Greek 10,000. My wife was like, someone take a drink. He's talking about the 10,000 Greeks again. Ooh. That's right. I'm going all the way back to hoplites being hired as mercenaries in Persia, baby. Xenophone. Woo! More drinks. Let's go. Xenophone. And they were basically mercenaries. They were betrayed. They were trying to march their way back. And so they were going all through modern-day Turkey to try to get back to Greece as the Persians tried to kill them. And along their way, they went through a ton of weird misadventures, including finding entire cities just empty, devoted people. Food just sitting on the pot. Nothing really showing why everyone's gone. And just a complete mystery in the footnote that Xenophone... Did you just draw a turnip? Burp. And it's I'm a turnip? Anyway. Well, let that be a joke for the ages. Turnip! Hot sauce! Women. Anyway. So, and this again is in the Balkans is in a similar region. Now, to be fair, a lot of dead cities that we do know about came during the Golden Horde period. Yes, the people who took over after the Mongols and all the rest, basically offshoot of the Mongols. And as their empire collapsed, a lot of cities were just abandoned out in the desert. But it's interesting. Those are obviously more explained. Or are they? At least most of them are. We have an interesting antidote through history of things like towns disappearing in this region. And it's frustrating because the Turks, I'm not saying they didn't keep good records, but they didn't keep good records of this area and they weren't sharing it with the Austrians. So it wasn't exactly like Farmbolt could look up some history in the towns and figure out where towns have just disappeared and died off. Or people ran away and said they were being killed by vampires, blah, 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 right? So,
blah, blah, blah.
We have to assume that the villagers are telling the truth. Well, okay, I know all the skeptical people. Hey, the villagers. Well, the problem is, as we see with things like I know I'm going to go over the place, but the Aboriginals of Australia. This is something I like to bring up with people a lot. The Aboriginals of Australia have a lot of kooky beliefs. I will call them kooky. Kooky, okay? Weird stuff. Also have disgusting abortion rituals. Hate it. But, interestingly enough, they have this really ridiculous story about how the camel was made. Something about a woman in a hump, and something fell on her. Don't ask.
And then she got a camel toe.
Now, the point is... yeah. The point is, camels were introduced by the British when they came there. They were not... they were not local to Australia. They were an add-on that the British brought along with them. So the British were there when the stories were made amongst the Aboriginals about the camel. Now you might say, well, so it was made up. But the camel was real, wasn't it? This shows a very important thing about even primitive peoples who I have a little bit of disrespect for because of weird abortion rituals and kooky stories. But you realize that even in these tribal settings, they don't just come up with a monster out of nowhere. something shows up, then they make a story to explain it. It's not that they explain something and then there's just a random monster. That's the key. That's the key kind of click that hit my mind when I was studying that whole concept and story. So, they may or may not have truth about the vampires, and their stories around them may very well be very false, but they aren't going to just make up a story about nothing. About nothing. Now again, about nothing. Again, right, we can kind of come back and say, oh, well, okay, they were just, the boogeyman in this case was diseases and starvation and people dying in their sleep. Well, in that case, though I have brought up there were vampires around the world, there should be more vampire stories. If all it takes is a disease to make a vampire in a person's head, then there should be rampant vampire stories all over the world in the sense of tribal situations. But there aren't. There are various mythoses and a lot of cultures that you expect of a widespread yet rare phenomenon. However, not the kind of thing you would expect if every time someone gets a cold and dies in the historical period, they all think vampire. You get me? You're on board? Right? Mm-hmm. There's this thing called the Black Death that killed a lot of people in these regions, right? Diseases. So, I will move on to the important parts. Alright, so, when they get to the grave, Formbolt watches them, and the villagers open up the casket, and they see crazy stuff. His fingernails have grown. His hair is grown. He looks strangely healthy. He's got the full belly and blah, blah, blah. And there's blood, fresh blood on the inside of his mouth. They, in a rage, freaking out at what they're seeing, stake him. And a weird, unearthly scream comes out of his mouth. And then the bodies stop dropping. By that, I mean nobody else dies in the village. Now, that's one part that the skeptics really ignore, right? This is, again, a real story. Formbolt was writing this down and is as imperial as you can make it. Mm-hmm. Right? This went into their imperial archives and all that. Mm-hmm. You don't get much more of a written case than this for proof of a historical thing. And in that, the bodies stopped dropping. If this was just a disease in mass hysteria, well, guess what? The bodies would have kept dropping. Mm-hmm. And they would have kept looking for more vampires if it was mass hysteria, right? If, on the other hand, something actually weird happened, and they stopped said weird thing, then the bodies would stop dropping. In fact, if there was something related to this dude that got people sick, whatever, maybe he was the last dude the last sick person saw before they died, then, presumably, staking the body would have spread the disease further and killed more people. Because he's dead, he's rotting, the disease might still be there. Now, again, we get back to the point that the snooty type scientists who in reality just hate all their ancestors and think they're smarter than everyone that ever existed
they don't have
ever.
Real jobs.
That too, right? This is an exclamation.
Look at my degree.
Oh yeah, 50% of my papers are fake.
I'm so much in debt and I don't know where the money is gone.
I love how my wife's version of this song is catchy and hilarious, and I went way too analytical. Yeah, if you don't know, modern science is a joke. 50% of their papers that are supposed to be peer-reviewed are completely fabricated. The entire scientific, all of it, it's crap. Like, I don't know what...
the small heads. Got no room for no head.
And you have all these people that'll be like clutching their pearls when you say this. I deal with this.
No room for their head.
God.
Yeah, sorry.
They even have a small hat. It's still not small enough. But, so, basically, if you don't know what I'm saying by that, peer review is supposed to be a bunch of people get together, read people's stuff, and try to reproduce this stuff in their labs and saying if it works or not. Blah, blah, blah. What this has turned out to be...
it's kind of interesting how there's a lack of scientific method amongst the so-called scientists.
Well, again, what this has turned into is just glorified editing.
Ooh.
And because after some thorough investigating, they found that 50% of these papers were had questionable methodology or were... And keep in mind, these are papers that were accepted by the scientific community after peer review. So they would be putting this as theories that are credible in front of your face. Were non-reproducible in labs or had problems with their methodology. Meaning they massaged the numbers to get the results they wanted. Or just outright lied. And this is a frustrating situation for me because I'm a sci-fi writer, so that means I can't really trust 50%, at least 50% of what comes out of the modern scientific community, which sucks. And you might say, well, that's a kind of a weird thing to bring up. Well, it's true. If you want to write science fiction of any kind,
kind of read,
you know, like, and like, how can I like look at a cool theory and go that and say, oh, they say it's credible, it could work. What if it actually works? And then, I don't know, 5 months later, the other scientists come around who are paid by the other set of companies that want them to be false. And, oh, in fact, they're wrong and false, and here's where their methodology failed. And then the other companies pay a new set of scientists to say, no, those guys are false. Like, it's kind of frustrating. I'm not going to lie. I don't want to write Orwell. I want to write something like, what was the... Oh, memory fail. The guy who wrote Leagues Under the Sea, though I prefer his Airship book better, to be honest.
Oh,
that one's entertaining. Yeah, I can't think of his... Jules Verne. Yeah. I prefer Jules Verne over Orwell, if you don't mind. I like to keep my writing at least semi-happy, if a bit gory.
Happily glorified writing.
So, back to what we're talking about.
I'm just looking at purses. I'm sorry.
Wow. I get distracted by books. You get distracted by purses. Are we talking about vampires right now? I think we are.
It's like I'm a woman or something.
It's just like we haven't done one of these in a while. We're rusty. But yes. So, the big takeaways here, right, is they would say that it was just natural decomposition and they got confused, right? The elongating of the nails. Oh, that's just, you know, technically your hands are decomposing and your things get longer. This is true. But it also goes back, and I would remind all of you, these peasants have been around death a lot. They've seen death a lot. There's been wars in this area a lot. There's a reason why the Turks are ceding this region to the Austrians, right? They know what death looks like a lot more than you. And a lot more than the scientists making these proposals. I almost guarantee it. And worse, right, they saw this death and all this death situation in the real world, not in a controlled environment in a lab. You get what I'm saying? So, some of these people know more because they've been around it, and they've been around death. Visceral. In lots of different regions, lots of different types. Well, not lots of different regions, but yeah, in lots of different situations. From all the other deaths involved. So if a body is actually going to freak them out, there's going to be something different about this body. Now, next one, right, is the claim that it was bloated, right? They say, oh, well, bloating is a natural part of decomposition.
Yeah, but after a while, it kind of...
And, yeah, my wife and I due to our experience in the third world, have actually seen things like bloated bodies. And they don't look healthy. Bloated bodies look nasty. You can tell the difference. I had a cousin
who was a security guard, had something explode on him.
Yeah, not pleasant. Bloating in a dead body doesn't look like the body's eaten a lot. And you can even see pictures of this in various wars and whatnot. They look kind of bloated fat, but they do not look healthy or nice. Yeah. This is not, like, just think of, okay, this is obviously fiction.
Have you ever seen a dead tick? It doesn't have its color. It's kind of... Okay.
Yes. Well, most of the ticks I run into are exploded, so...
Yeah, after they explode, they kind of dried up. And, you know.
we had animals in Florida. You learn these random things you don't expect. But...
We had animals in Thailand that had ticks. It's kind of funny. Oh, yeah, and also if you put a tick over a flame, they expand.
It's pretty funny.
They expand so big. It's so creepy. I kind of did that just for laughs.
Well, blood-sucking freaks deserve it. Anyway, yeah, vampires, you too. But...
Yeah, you heard that.
Anyone have a flamethrower? We have a cook-off if necessary. It's a very big tick.
Leech.
Anyway, I was going to bring up zombie movies and whatnot. How do you make a zombie look even more disgusting? You bloat them, right? And this fellow didn't look bloated. He looked healthy and like he'd had a really good meal. You see the difference there? Right? And again, these peasants would know what a bloated body would look like because of all the wars and stuff that had been happening in the region. It's really kind of annoying to deal with this kind of mid-wit, basic logic, pseudo-logic thing that just gets slapped. Yeah, that just gets slapped on mysteries all the time. That just, case solved. We came up with a weird random concept that kind of explains it enough in our minds. It must be that and nothing else.
Yeah, because salt never makes you bloated. Have you seen a whale in a whale ship? All the salt they use.
Most people have not seen whales on whale ships.
Okay, I haven't either, but I've seen some fish on there.
You've seen something. Bloating. Speaking of that, you guys should look at our previous episode about the snake on the sea serpent caught by the whalers. That was a really interesting episode that nobody watched for some reason.
Yeah, go back and watch it, you freaks.
It might have been because I forgot to share it. Anyway. So, the next one, right, that they explain away is the blood on the mouth. Well, that, I agree, is actually a natural process. That said, the blood is not fresh. See, it's rotting blood. See, they don't explain that to great. When the blood comes out like that, because of the gases, it's already rotting. Mm-hmm. This body had been in the ground for weeks already, okay? Mm-hmm. The natural decomposition can bring fresh blood to the mouth. However, it's not fresh blood, but blood to the mouth. Mm-hmm. But it's not fresh at that point. Mm-hmm. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Even still, we have another problem. And is the cat good? Right? Is the next exclamation of all the blood coming out in a gush after they stab it. Meow yourself.
You meow.
Did I meow back at him in frustration?
Did you meow yourself?
Meow yourself, right. No.
Oh, that's a pretty
It's vampire skin, don't you know? Anyway, we'll move off of that. And of course, they don't talk about how, like in this case, blood came gushing forth off of the throat after they stab it. Which is a bit of a problem. Now you might say, I'm trying to debate how much of a problem it is. I move on. I want to make sure I know what I'm talking about before I just declare something.
Like a true scientist should.
If I start wearing a lab coat, I want you to smack me as hard as you can.
I remember that. Before or after I drank.
Drink more so it hurts more. Anyway. So, the next one that they'll claim is, right, that a noise can be made that it'll sound eerie if the lungs are stabbed or something, and air will be released.
Okay, have you ever heard someone, like, when they get stabbed in the lungs, they don't really...
Well, the problem with this was Farmbolt made it clear that it was a piercing cry. It was loud.
No, that's weird.
Those death rattles are not
muffled.
loud because they're whatever air is still trapped inside the lungs.
It's very muffled.
And is released by the stabbing. Now, again, there's also a little bit of a question here, because if they staked the heart, then they didn't stake the lungs, meaning it didn't drive the oxygen out of the lungs when they stabbed it. Now, that said, we could argue they missed and they hit a lung, and that's why the thing came out, made the noise, right? But again, loud shriek is not a light, like a or the meh, whatever the vocal cord was making.
She goes,
right. You know, there's not enough gases to make a loud shrieking sound. That is a bit of a problem. And again, right, this is the mid-wit washover statement of like, oh, hey, in certain situations, bodies can actually make certain noises. And then when you point out it doesn't apply in this case, they'll say, hey, what are you talking about? In this rare random situational awareness purpose up my butt around the corner thing that can happen 10% of the time, it could happen. So it clearly happened here. Right. Anyway.
Go back home to mommy, boy.
Yeah, and again, I want to point out, this is not the account coming from the villagers. The villagers didn't write this down. This was the third party who was a little horrified about what he was seeing and very confused. Remember, he was trying to convince them to not exhume the body and to wait for other people to be witness to this for obvious reasons. And the villagers were the ones who were so freaked out, saying, we will leave right now, we will abandon our homes, risk starvation, because these are farmers, guys. This is where their food is. I know it's hard to understand, but back then, if you abandoned your land, you probably were going to die. This is not, you can't, you're a refugee somewhere at best. Like, you abandon your harvest, there goes your food supply. Bad juju. So they were willing to risk that over facing the vampire. Or the alleged vampire, or whatever was allegedly killing them. Which again, magically stopped after they staked the alleged body monster thing. And so, he said it was a loud shriek that freaked him out. And again, there is no explanation for why the body looked healthy. The face looked healthy. Right? There's no point in decomposition where your face actually looks healthier. Okay?
Absolutely.
Fresh blood can come to the mouth. Bloating can happen. Fingernails
Fresh
can...
blood to the mouth? You mean rotting blood to the mouth?
Yeah, just some blood on the mouth like they saw.
Yeah, but usually it's rotten. No.
Fingernails can appear to grow. Hair can appear to grow.
Oh, you're talking about that. Okay, sorry.
Right? But healthy looking? No. Not healthy looking. It still looks freaky as heck. I've seen the pictures. Ironic, too, that a lot of these pictures of like the decomposing hands that are looking like vampiric are from the very same time period by people who obviously know about the decomposition process. Which is kind of interesting when you're trying to claim all these people just didn't know the decomposition process. I don't know how to tell you people, but humans have been around a while, and we've been decomposing the entire time. It's been observed. You guys aren't the first ones to turn on... Oh, maybe that's not the right word. You are not the first ones to look at a dead body. I mean, maybe it's like a French thing. Have you ever really looked at a dead body? Like, really looked really closely? And the answer is yes. Yes, they have. There's been anatomy things going back to the Greeks and all sorts of spots. All right? This is not new. You're not special. I don't know how to tell you that. You aren't special. The people we're talking about in these more religious times, just look at Civil War as a bit of a jump, but we'll go, like, look at the notes, or even Farmbolt's notes here. These people are a lot smarter than the average man these days. They're more religious, smarter, and have had a lot harder lives. It's a frustrating thing when you have these mid-witted people with just the most pride stick up their ass of my life, looking down on the entirety of humanity because they think their generation is superior than everybody else, when they observably are not. Observably fatter, dumber, more easily manipulated, and still to this day proceed to be the dumbest generations I've ever seen. And I'll count all the current ones. Gen X, Boomer, all of us. Me too, millennials. It's funny. They just released definitive evidence that yes, the CIA in fact killed JFK. Do you think any of these Boomers or Gen Xers who have ranted and raved about people like me who have pointed out that the dude was obviously assassinated by interests who wanted him dead, and that he was also obviously gay? Right. You know, are we going to get an apology? Is anyone going to stop and go, hey, maybe these conspiracy theorists, are getting a lot of this stuff right. Maybe we should start listening to them about some of the stuff. Maybe not all of it. There's some freaky stuff out there. But don't you think, it should give you some pause about some of your beliefs? If you're one of these types, just think the world is what you've been told on TV and all the rest. Right? But no, it doesn't happen. And I go back. So, I know I'm probably going to get a flack. You're always going to have this gamma type dude who's saying, well, actually, bodies do decompose that way, which is hilarious because I've just agreed bodies do decompose that way. Yes, and I'm pointing out that the people observing these bodies in this case knew how these bodies decomposed and didn't freak out about a vampire under their sheets every other night. It was only in this time period. And when they killed the alleged vampire body thing, the deaths in the village stopped. They were so set on it because previous villages had been destroyed that they were going to leave their village over it. This is serious business. This isn't, oh no, a body died kind of funny and my cousin's uncle's aunt told me that this one dead dude showed up in a dream before killing her. Right? You don't abandon your entire village over that. And you have 9 bodies in a row and then suddenly it just all stops. Yes, it could very well have been a very picky disease that waited like a little prankster in the corner for them to stake the vampire and then stop killing people. Hilarious. If I was a virus, that's exactly how I would act. But I think we can say, outside the realm of a self-conscious virus causing a very hilarious joke, that it probably wasn't that. And that's the irritating thing. And I'm sorry about the tirade, but I'm sick of these people who come up with a half a percentile chance about their crappy little theory about why this happened, without looking at all the details of these cases, and then just declare that that's what it is because it makes more sense in their mind.
Because it makes me dull.
I mean, from that logic, the Aboriginal story about the camel with the lady with the hump and all that makes more sense to them. So I guess that means the camel was made from a hump and all that.
Stop humping.
Stop humping things. Gosh dang it.
You'll grow a toe.
When I'm this the alcohol's talking. Anyway.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But that aside, I can still agree that there is a small chance that something else was going on. However, it's pretty suspect, complete with the fact that though all the symptoms are signs of natural decomposition, none of them are to the state that was described, including the very healthy looking skin, bloating but healthy looking, the amount of blood involved, and how long the body was in the ground, plus the loud shriek rather than the quiet sigh that comes out in the cases of someone being stabbed after being dead and gases trapped in their lungs coming out.
Taking their last breath too.
Yeah, and again, it's what's being described in these medical peoples is vocal cords that have the air around them. You know, The funny thing about vocal cords, if you get to just what they're physically are, they're like an instrument. So
it's
if
like
you just
pipe.
put air through them, they're going to make the noise. Right? That's why if you lose too many teeth, you have trouble talking. Because just like a clarinet that loses...
people who talk with a lisp.
Yeah.
And they have really bad gaps.
Yeah, the gaps, right. Right. Because just like, say, if a saxophone gets extra holes poked in it, it's not going to make the same sound.
That's why you have that weed. Just like a clarinet.
That's why you have weed?
Reed. And if you move it the wrong way, if you move it one way, you'll be able to do lower notes than high notes and vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's being described. But again, you're never going to have the equivalent of a scream happen from that. Right? Because even a forceful release of the lungs, let's say they miss the heart and hit the lungs, no, I don't know.
Purses.
Hang on. Oh, sorry, folks, about the weird pause and thing. I might have held my wife's hostage as I made sure I understood things and researched again. I researched this for a while, and then we didn't do this the week I thought I was going to do it, so I wanted to refresh my notes. So, the translation I'm going with says shriek. And this had to be a pretty loud noise because, as Formbolt put it, all of the peasants were in a frenzy when they saw the body and saw it wasn't decomposed. Meaning they were all being really loud and screaming. Have you noticed a group of people when they're about to do something, like break something, burn something down, kill something? They're not quiet. They tend to get into like the instincts of rah, 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 and they're all screaming and loud. So for them to stab and then everybody hear the noticeable shriek, that had to be pretty loud. What most people don't know is these noises and groans that bodies can make, they're not loud. They're like the sound of a whisper or a refrigerator. Like I wanted to make sure I wasn't lying about this, so I did a quick internet search. The internet wasn't being very helpful, so I did some AI to help me search, and I got to the conclusion.
You got an argument with AI.
It was kind of funny. I stumped it with these questions. It was pretty hilarious.
Moving the goalposts like a scientist did. Try to use pseudo-dialectic to make it sound very compelling.
Yes, very good. But that was the point I was going to make. It was a pretty loud sound because you could hear it over the crowd of villagers who were all in the grave stabbing the darn thing. And also that these sounds aren't generally loud. Also, the blood coming out, though there's some things like it could be some blood tissue driven out by the force of the wound. I mean, there's this new thing that I found in my brief little research thing there with my conversation with the AI, which was
amazing.
I know. They claimed that the body looked fresh because it was in the cold ground sometimes in fall or winter in Serbia. Problem with that is, that means the body wouldn't have been bloated like was described, and you wouldn't have had gases to produce the shriek, which comes in heated environments. You would have big bloating, lots of gases, you stab it, it's like a balloon, it comes out. That makes sense? Yeah, and the gases might also, the noise sometimes is also coming out of the wound itself, the hole that the knife or the stake makes.
Yeah,
that makes any sense. And so, it's interesting again. I always come back to this same thing. These bodies, these villagers, knew what death looked like in this war-torn area. They probably had even had people been around bodies that had gotten stabbed and made noises. Okay? It seems kind of unlikely for people who were around death all the time to just jump on this. And it's funny, the AI was like, it's the context. Yeah, exactly. The context. 9 people died, all of them saying that they had dreams of the dude coming after them. And then, this is my favorite thing the AI did when I pointed out that I asked it, were there, in case my research failed and somebody else had seen it, were there any more reported deaths after the stabbing and the burning of the body? And the answer was no, there wasn't. The AI tried to say, oh, well, there were no reported deaths, and that Farmbolt was just trying to talk about the hysteria in his report, and so had no reason to put down the deaths. This is patently false, by the way. Farmbolt was not there for the hysteria. He was there to report on the town and how they would be put into the empire. And don't you think a disease spreading through the surrounding villages might be kind of important to an empire that just acquired a territory? As in a disease that could spread back into the empire if they're not careful? Don't you think details like more people dying in that village after the vampire ceremony, vampire staking ceremony, would have been important to his report? Yes, 100% it would have been very important. So I should say the concept that he didn't talk about bodies dropping in the same village where they'd staked the thing is kind of dumb. Yes, he would have. He definitely would have. It would have been important to the case. And thus, I rest up. It's funny, I didn't mean to talk only about this case, but it's similar enough to other vampire cases. Now, I won't say that every single vampire case is real, but it's fascinating that enough real cases happened that they did start putting together a vampire inspection crew made up of a priest, a physician, and an officer from the imperial court. What's really interesting here, that I'm going to get into, is we have an interesting... Hey, interesting. Did you know what's interesting, wife?
Mm-hmm.
We have a case that I should probably save for another episode that I'll get into more detail later. But it's probably what should be the most famous vampire story ever. And that actually happened in World War One. Ooh, suddenly you can't say peasants and people who were just superstitious. This also happened in the heart of the Austrian Hungarian Empire at this time. And you can't say people didn't understand how bodies decomposed anymore. They were around a lot of bodies, but we're in World War One. I don't know if you know. And so it actually stems around a serial killing case. In this case, if I can repeat myself some more, we have a man named Kiss. He gets drafted into the army. And he goes and people find a bunch of barrels sealed up in his basement. They're all gasoline barrels. The war is getting a little heavy. They're like, this is gasoline, and he's storing, hoarding gasoline. We need it. So they break open the barrels, and they find dead women in each barrel. Preserved and pickled. Awkward. And each one has a pair of, bite marks on their, piercing holes on their necks and are drained of blood. Funny enough, Kiss at this point was injured and in a hospital from the war. And basically the message goes out, take him in, we need to take this guy in, he's a serial killer, we're going to put him in court, right? By the time they get to him, he's disappeared. And his servant, who was looking over the place, disappears as well. And they never catch Kiss. In the same region, same kind of area, we have these crazy vampire stories pop up. And you can't, with this one, you can't say, oh, weird superstitions. They found all these bodies. They were drained of blood. We could argue whether or not he drained them with an instrument or whatever. It's just fascinating to constantly see this weird stuff around vampirism in this region. And I was bringing it to the class that I would like a better description. If it's not vampires, then I would like to have a better explanation than what the scientists are trying to propose. Because as the AI realized, it was arguing with me, its position is kind of weak. Their whole argument stems on the idea that the peasants didn't understand decomposition and the way bodies decompose. However, they were very familiar with death and would have seen all stages of decomposition in winter, spring, fall, all of it. And it wouldn't have been weird to them to see a body in winter slightly preserved, because they would have been used to seeing bodies in the cold slightly preserved. But I digress. It's a fun case to look at. I don't think the official explanation makes any sense at all. But people like to have the easiest explanation. And that's what it is. It always will be. But there's a reason why this Austrian official was confused. And there's a reason why this region always has strange stories. Ooh. And whether or not vampires are spiritual entities or physical entities or what have you is besides the point. Weird stuff does happen out there. And I would like better explanations for even when they're physical and make complete sense. Or should make complete sense. I don't like that ending as much. I feel like I fumbled it and talked too much. Anyway, I might cut a bunch of that stuff out.
It's the alcohol.
It's the alcohol. It's weird. Anyway, story's weird. Don't like the main narrative. Doesn't make any darn sense. Want it to make sense.
Something's hinky. Go get some help.
Don't know if it's vampires or something else. Don't like it. Also, is Kiss still out there, that mother trucker?
Stop it.
Somebody kill him.
Stop it. No.
We'll talk about the...
Shut the...
Well, there was this guy who signed the Declaration of Independence that was rumored to be an
and
immortal.
you know what?
He might have also got caught biting a prostitute. Anyway, we'll get to that story next week. Later, guys.
Oh, lordy.
This has been the Grizzly Files. Oh, wait, I have an outro. Ah! You want to say bye, wife?
Bye.
That was her saying she loves you guys. It's awesome listening to it. Catch you later. Thanks for watching another episode of the Grizzly Files. New episodes come up every Saturday at 5 p.m., so make sure to come back for that. We also have a Sunday school lessons for young men called the Warrior's Path. New lessons go up every single Sunday at 9:30 in the morning in written form, and then on arcava.com, and then we'll do a live stream going over it the next day on every Monday at 10 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. depending on when my kids go to bed. We also have another live stream on Fridays, which is our Grizzly gaming stream. It's a good time to hang out and talk games and all kinds of crazy crap. That one, again, will start at 10 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. depending on when my kids go to bed. We also have a kids book that you guys should check out. It's called David and the Three Bears. It's up on Amazon. It's like if you made a story about King David as a kid when he's attacking bears and things into a fable. Yeah, that's all. Come back for more. We're going to be making more content as we go. So like, subscribe, share. Come back for it all. Can't wait to see you there.